Delighted to say we are continuing the Drive for 5 special. We are taking over OTB Sports Radio all afternoon. It's all with thanks to Tech7. Simply tech it and leave it. And we have a brilliant guest for you in studio. We're thrilled he's made the effort to come in. A retired High Court judge, amongst many other things. Bryan McMahon, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, I am looking very scruffy at best, and you were looking very sharp in your suit, so I apologise for bringing down the tone of this occasion from the off.
I'm glad you apologised for it. I'm not going to take off my tie.
You're dead right. Do you wear a tie most days?
No, not when I'm off duty, and not since I retired, but I thought coming into an institution like this deserved a certain bit of formality.
Well, a bit of much needed class. You're the only one who's wore a tie all day. When did you retire from the High Court?
I retired in 1991. Oh, sorry, 2001.
Do you miss it?
Hold on, 2011.
2011?
I'm losing decades. I'm losing my memory. I'm losing everything.
You only started in 99.
Yeah, no, I 2011. That's mandatory at 70.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you want to go?
No, did I want to go? I had no choice, so it was easy. I had to go, so I didn't entertain any notion of staying.
Okay.
So it was like coming to the winning post in a race. It ended, and I was quite happy to move on.
How do you find retirement now? Are you keeping busy?
I am. I have a good deal in hand. The government have asked me to do a couple of things in relation to asylum and refugee. I did a report on that for them. And I'm swearing in new citizens several times a year as we stand. So those are interests that keep me going. And I'm delighted to be part of it, in fact. You know, I mean, since 2011, we have 130,000 new citizens in this country.
Yeah. I watched a speech of yours. It popped up on YouTube, as everything seems to these days, where you were speaking about welcoming immigrants to the country, and you made the point to them, and I presume it's something you do whenever you speak to them, where you said, come here, but do not forget where you've come from. Do not forget your stories. Do not forget your parents. Do not forget your traditions. Bring them. We want them, which I thought was a brilliant message to give to people.
Well, I also tell them that I look forward to the day when one of their children or one of their children's children lead a team out into Croke Park or carry the Irish flag at the head of an Olympic march.
Not far away.
Not far away, not far away. And unfortunately, I think we had one or two good guys down in Tralee who were aiming for the Kerry football team, but they were snapped up by the Australians.
Right.
So we keep trying.
You're of Listowel in Kerry.
Yes, Listowel. I grew up in Listowel in the 40s and 50s, I suppose. Small town, but a very lovely place to grow up in. We didn't have a whole lot of entertainment except football and football. We had no hurling, little hurling. My father did one time try to introduce hurling into the schools, but shortly thereafter there was a North Kerry Championship match between Ballyduff and Lixna, I think, and all hell broke loose. So I think most of the parents withdrew their children from that wild game. So it was all football.
Your father, obviously, people will be familiar with him, brilliant writer and playwright and one of the founders of the Listowel Writers' Week. He was school teacher?
School teacher and a writer, especially.
And so he would have taught you, did he?
Well, interestingly enough, when I was about to go into his class, I got ill, and I missed a whole year while I should have been in his class. So I didn't have him as a teacher, but I had him at home for the rest of the time.
Right, okay. And what illness struck you down?
I had what was called milk TB. It was TB from milk at that time. There was no pasteurization.
Right.
And I was in bed at home literally for a year.
Right, wow. A long year, I'd say.
A long year, yeah. But it kind of formed me, I think, in ways. You look back and you ask yourself, had it an influence on you? And it had. It probably made me more self-reliant, more introspective, more able to appreciate being out of bed.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of pluses with it. And I've noticed a lot of people who did succeed in life have had similar setbacks in their early days, and I think it gives them some resilience at a young age.
Yes.
I'm sure there's sad stories too, but I found it as a positive experience when I got through it.
And you talk about Listowel and football being the main source of entertainment. Was it a love affair for you with football?
Well, it was a default situation, you know. I mean, we had no choice. I mean, if you wanted to be active, you had to play football. I mean, we had a river in the town, and the Silver River Field, and that provided us with entertainment during the summer. We swam in it, we walked by it, we fished in it at the appropriate times, and when we got older, we romanticised on it. And we had Ballybunion out the road from us, which was only 10 miles, and we had that in the summer. But the default situation was always football. And we were up on the football field, unorganised, I might well say, you know. Crowds of us going up and kicking a ball around the place from dawn till dark.
And across the kind of, I guess, as far as your memory stretches, maybe mid to late 40s onwards, were the Kerry matches on radio? Were you listening to
Oh,
this?
yes, of course. And
you would have had a radio?
Well, we didn't have a radio, as to my recollection, until about 1949, as I recollect, because I remember going across the road to a town farmer, Jack Keane, who had a radio in the early 40s, and every Sunday when McMahon Hair was on, he had it out in the street, and we were all gathered round trying to pick up the electricity that was McMahon Hair.
Wow.
But then, of course, everyone got radios later on. It was all radio, but there was no television until the late 60s.
Yeah, sure. 60s. That sounds like a fun way to listen to a game with everybody coming together for it.
Yes, yeah. And of course, no one heard the same thing, or no one created the same picture.
Sure.
You know, there was 50 people listening to it, but we all had our own video in our own head as to what was happening. And that was some of the charm of it, of course, and some of the cause for disputes afterwards. There was no objective evidence, and no one to check that McMahon here was telling the truth.
Well, true as well, yeah. And so, like, did the players have a mythical status in that you wouldn't have known what they looked like around that time, and it was down to your imagination, or would there have been pictures around the county?
Well, we went to the matches, so I would have had an idea. There was no helmets, of course, in football at that time. So I did have a visual identification with many of them.
But if you didn't go to a match, you wouldn't have seen photos of them around the place?
No. Right. You see photographs in the paper, you know, pixelated.
Some of them.
Things, some of them.
Yeah.
And not of others. So you had to imagine things. But you weren't interested in what they looked like. You were interested in their heroics and their actions and their achievements. And you would quickly don the jersey and say you were John Dowling if John Dowling had scored 3 goals and you didn't know what he looked like. That wouldn't stop you from identifying him.
Your first All-Ireland final was 1953.
Yeah.
12 years old?
12 years old. I went with my father and mother, who had been invited by the Ard Corla for something that he had done on behalf of the GA, and he had tickets, and he got 2 stand tickets. The 4th person in our company was a man called Louis Amorachou, originally from Armagh, and played football with Armagh, but had married a Kerry woman from Lizelt and Kissan, and he lived in Listowel at the time. I was a big friend of my father, so he came with us. It was a 3 Kerry and 1 Armagh person heading up.
And how do you head up?
We headed up in the car. My father had a car, and that's interesting. I mean, it was an odyssey. You know,
I'm sure it was.
You headed off on Saturday morning. I had to get released from school. I wasn't at the semi-final. My father brought Gary and Jim, my elder brothers, to the semi-final, and he said that if Kerry won the semi-final, I could go to the final.
Okay.
So that's how I got my seat in the car. But we went on. But travelling to Dublin at that time, you had to build in and factor in punctures, and you know, it was an odyssey. And the roads were bad,
sure,
full of nails and tacks, as far as I could see, and pointy stones. So you never knew when you were going to get there.
And how long did it take?
Well, it took 6 hours or whatever it was.
I feel like that's a long day when you're 12.
It was, well, I didn't mind. You know, there was chatting and there was things, and I wasn't at school that day.
Most importantly,
the most important.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience, I must say. The Kerry Armagh match was, they say anecdotally, that it was the biggest crowd ever in Croke Park, because it's recorded as having 86,000.
Yeah.
But I know, and I was standing with my friend and minder, Louis Murphy, that the gates broke down behind us in Jones's Road. And there was a huge crush-in of people who never paid getting into the pitch. And then towards the end of the match, there was a huge spill out onto the pitch as well. So it was a huge experience. I remember well one thing which has nothing to do with football, but the memories I have of it is what I would like to talk about today, because our memories aren't always about the 70 minutes or the 60 minutes on the field.
Sure.
I was drinking lemonade in the crowd, and Louis Murphy, who was from Armagh and a good laconic man, said to me, "Sonny McMahon, if I were you, I wouldn't be drinking any more of that. It's very piss-placating." I had never heard that word before, but I knew exactly what he meant. And that's one of the things I brought back from the 53 All-Ireland, a new word in my vocabulary. Paddy Sheehy was dropped for the match. He was captain of the Kerry team, was dropped the day before. His father had been a selector, and some say his father had left the selection room. And in that brief period, a person called Dermot Hannafin from Castleisland was substituted. That's one of the factors. Peter McDermott, the man with the cap, was the referee.
Yeah.
And one of the incidents I do remember is Kerry were 2 points up, I think, and Armagh were given a penalty. And I was lifted up by Louis Murphy, to his eternal credit, to see the penalty. And Bill McCorry came up and he drove it wide. And I remember that quite clearly. The other peculiar thing that struck in my memory was with Louis Murphy afterwards. We were walking down, and we went down by the quays, and we counted 84 buses from Armagh along the quays, parked. So the crowds were enormous, and it was the first time that the northern teams were aspiring to get their hands on Sam Maguire. So that was the first, and the preparation, the anticipation, and the memories are still vivid with me.
We have a video of 53, actually, some archive footage here. I don't know, is it ready to go, lads, if we have it there? We'll try and run it there. So this is the footage of 1953. And you can put up the volume there if we can.
You must remember, too, they were also up on the stands, and the roofs of the stands at this game.
Right, on top of the roofs?
On top of the roofs. So health and safety wasn't invented.
Yeah, so that's the Armagh team. There's the referee you're talking about.
Yeah, he was known as the man with the cap. He's not wearing a cap there.
The Artane Boys Band, yeah.
Now, these are all pictures, of course, that they were ingrained on our memories.
Yeah.
After you saw them once or twice. So you need never be in Croke Park to imagine the build-up to any match. No.
Yes, you can
if you have been there. Because you know what the Artane Boys Band are doing, you know the teams.
Here's the Bishop, Bishop Moynihan.
Yeah, he threw in the ball.
He's from Kerry, he was from Kerry, wasn't he?
He was the Kerry Archbishop, yeah. Was he the Archbishop of Cashel? The Archbishop of Cashel came to throw it in later on. I don't know what, he was Bishop of Kerry later. I'm not sure whether he was Kerry at that time. But there's a scurry now. When the ball is thrown in, there was all the players lined up in the centre of the field, and there was a scurry then, and all the VIPs ran for the sideline.
The Bishop runs. They
all go. This now. Look at this. There's 20 or 30
Get
people.
off.
Okay, get
off.
These guys.
God, look, I mean, you weren't kidding about the crowd, were you? Wow.
No, the crowd was fantastic. And they broke into the field then later on, I think, at a later stage. But again, all those things, this is 70 years ago.
Yeah.
And there was no fencing and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And rushing onto the field was part of the excitement.
The fun, I'm sure. Did you get onto the field?
No. Right. I was minded.
You were going nowhere.
I was going nowhere, no. Yeah, but when you asked me to come in today, I'm not going to talk about statistics. I'm not going to talk about the present-day team. I'm not talking about the game next Sunday, because you have all sorts of statisticians and pundits who know a lot more about the technical aspects of the game than I do. But what I do want to talk about is something that is almost forgotten. It's in the background of our memories, but not articulated often enough. As I say, the excitement, whether you're at the match or not, the effect these things have on a local community, in particular if one of their local sons is picked on the team or the panel. The stories, the debates, the narratives, the history, the comparisons. Is he as good as Paddy Bone? This kind of thing. No way of adjudicating on these things, because neither of them had seen Paddy Bone play in that sense. The anticipation, the rumours that went round, and we had no formal source of information. Yeah. It was spreading out rumours. We had no TV, first of all. Radio was limited, and you had no PR delivering definitive statements as what the position was. It was all rumours.
Yeah.
So it kind of stimulated the dreams. You know, people identifying with people and saying, I'm going out at half-time or going out before the big match is thrown in and running out to the backyard, being Mick O'Connell, who he was for 15 minutes, back to the... It set a touch to your youthful enthusiasm and your dreaming. It was the making and the embracing of heroes. That's what it was, essentially, to young minds like mine at the time. Magic. It was in that sense. And the pageantry of the whole thing, the myths, the Cronin. I met John Cronin. I think John Cronin played in that match in 1953 for centre back. But I met him years later. He was in the army at the time of this, and I was introduced to him, and he stuck out his hand to me and he said, 2 questions. Yes, John. Who was the greatest centre back that Kerry had? And why was I? So there was humour as well,
yes,
as this kind of mythology and heroes. And what I would broadly call romance. The romance of the whole thing was wonderful. It captured me and captured a lot of people in a kind of an unarticulated way. But it's all that pageantry, that build-up, that excitement,
yes,
and the uncertainty. Of course, there's 70 minutes of warfare, you know? Intensive, frenetic energy being spent by 30, 35 players on the field, and that's wonderful to watch. But it's only part of the story. And there's lots of people focus on that now exclusively to the exclusion of everything else. And as I say, all great stories are based on a single simple theme. The tribe is robbed. A hero is selected to go out and retrieve the object. The hero goes out and tackles the enemy, and the hero comes home with the object. If you think of Turnbow Coolah, if you think Jack and the Beanstalk, they're all the same. And this fitted in very well to that pattern. You know, the heroes were off the train and things like that. And the journey, we went by car, but more frequently at that time, the midnight train was the mode of transport to those things. There was a train left Tralee and stopped in Listowel sometime around 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, the Saturday night, to go to the Croke Park. And that was a big event. Are you going on the train? The ghost train? Have you got the sandwiches? Or you know, this thing. And a train might be scheduled to stop in Listowel at 11 o'clock, but it could come at 9:30. You know, there seemed to be uncertainty. So you had to get there early, you had to grab your seat, and you had to make sure of it.
Yeah.
There was an old GA man in Listowel called John Z. Moran. He owned a hotel and a restaurant. A fine, eloquent old man, spoke in Victorian English. But he describes, these, when people came back from the army, they were debriefed. They had to tell the stories in the cobbler shop and the harness makers or wherever they were gathered.
Yes.
And John Z. used to tell the story. For all the world, it was the eve of an All-Ireland, when some close neighbours and friends made our way to the station in Listowel. We took up our position in the carriage. The Foxford rug was spread across our knees, and a pack of cards was introduced. From overhead rack, a bottle of Robin Redbreast was introduced to the company. There was 2 great shrieks of the whistle. The carriage shuddered, and we were off into the darkness to go to the All-Ireland in Dublin. That's the way he started his, you know, Shanachie stuff, of telling narration of what had happened.
Yes.
And it wasn't always as formal as that. Now, he was a man who loved polysyllabics and things like that. Someone came to the door of the hotel one time selling cabbage, and he said, "Do you want any cabbage, Mr. Moran?" And he said, "Forward, gent, to the culinary department." So he was a man that had great character and colour and language. Incidentally, and this is more in interest in general, he lodged the deeds of his hotel to secure the purchase of the first sports field in Listowel. So that was the kind of person. Wow. And that happened quite frequently around the country. Some citizen of some means lodged the security, because the banks were not as flahool then as they were later.
Yeah.
So someone had to go security for the pitch.
Right.
So that was the thing. Let me just, if I might, is poetry forbidden in this poem?
It's encouraged for this hour.
Okay. Bernard O'Donoghue is a poet from Cork, Cullen in County Cork. He's an Oxford Don. But I was in Oxford one year, St. Patrick's Night, and he was called upon to say a poem. And in the midst of all these Oxford Dons with their straw hats and their silver scarves and their bottles of bubbly turned upside down in the bin, and that was only the gentleman, he was called upon to say a poem.
Yeah.
And he got up and he said the following poem. It's called The Munster Final. And it's written in the 80s. And it was a time when Kerry were very much in the ascendancy. And here you had the poor Corkman heading up to Killarney for what we might get next Sunday in Croke Park, you know. And he's talking about going there to the match, and he describes going to the match. And it's a countryman from Cork going up to what he thinks is the inevitable. It's Munster Final. In memory of Tom Creedon, who died 28th of August 1983. He played with Cork. The Jarvies to the west side of the town are robbers to a man. And if you tried to drive through the gap, they'd nearly strike you with their whips. So we parked facing for home and joined the long troop down the meadow sweet and woodbine-scented road into the town. By blue Killarney's lakes and glens to see the white posts on the green. To be deafened by the muzzy megaphone of Jimmy Shand and the testy bray to keep the gangways clear. As for Tom Creedon, I can see him still. He's back arching casually to field and clear. Glory Macroom, goodbye Tom Creedon. We'll be back next year to try our luck in Cork. We will be back next year roaring ourselves hoarse, praying for better luck. After first mass we'll get there early, that's our only hope. Keep clear of the car parks so we're not hemmed in. And we'll be home, God willing, for the cows. Now, that is what I'm talking about. And that describes not only Corkmen coming to Killarney, but Kerrymen going to Cork on many an occasion when their verse was picked on them. And there's very little about the actual footballing technique.
Yes.
It's about the event, getting home for the cows, what they had to do, you know. So it's that's what I'm talking about.
So, I mean, there's a thread through all of that, which is what it does for the community and people and bringing people together. Lots of things have changed across the course of your lifetime. That magic that football and sport seems to have when it comes to bringing people together and communities together, when other aspects of Irish life have kind of drifted away or lost that maybe centrality they once had, the football seems to still have it. Like, people are coming together this week to talk about the football. Maybe more important than ever, that there's something like that strangers in a shop can bring up and talk about.
Yeah, well, I was chairman of the Abbey Theatre for 11 years, up to recently. And I used to always say there were three great indigenous institutions in this country. The Abbey Theatre, the GAA, and Comhaltas Ceoltóirí Éireann. And these were three institutions which helped to glue the people together. They built from the foundations up. They came from the ground. And people were faithful to them. And the GAA managed it very well by and large. There was problems as you go on, but by and large, they were faithful to their support, and the support paid them back in spades. And it wasn't, I mean, I'm not talking about the big All-Irelands or the Munster finals. I mean, we had hectic matches in Listowel the day the Borough Rovers met in combat with the Glown, and they made poetry about that too. These are two streets playing each other.
Right.
So, you know, it operates at all levels, nationally, provincially, locally, and in parish to parish, you know. I mean, when we played football in Listowel and we went out 6 miles out the road to my van, to play my van, we were called the Townies, and it was fair game, you know. They killed the Townies, get the Townies, you know. So you wore your badge wherever you could. And 2 weeks later, we were all talking out for a provincial team, or a divisional team together. But it's all kind of suspended animosity.
Yes.
And that has limits. You don't kick a man on the ground. There are some kind of unwritten rules.
Yes.
But there's respect also.
There's a wider context.
There is. There's a wider context.
Yeah. I don't want you to walk out of here and say I didn't get to come to a poem that I wanted to read. Is there any other poetry or songs or writings about the sport?
Well, my father wrote a ballad on the 27th of September 1955, 2 days after the Great All-Ireland between Kerry and Dublin.
Okay.
And Kerry turned the tables on that date. Dublin were long favourites.
Did you get a seat in the car for that one?
No. That was I forget what happened there. But this is the opening of that.
Okay.
Oh, the dawn it broke in Kerry, and we raced across the ferry, and we set our course for Dublin with a beautiful hi-ho. And our hearts with hope were beating as the ocean waves were meeting, and the mountain sheep were bleating in old Kerry long ago. Now, there's 8 verses of that. I'm not going to bore your listeners or you with them all. But that's the kind of setting.
Yes.
Set it. And then there's a verse at the end saying good luck, congratulations to Dublin.
Well, give us the verse at the end, maybe.
Well, I'll give that at the end of the programme. I might have to run out of here. But people are saying, how'd you write that in 2 days? Well, the fact of the matter is he had written 7 verses.
Yeah.
He'd only kept the last verse vacant for the news. What was the item, you know? So that was very common. And these were songs that were sung around the country in pubs and Puck Fair, Listowel races,
right.
Galway races. And there was a very famous ballad maker here that I used to meet years and years later, Jimmy Heine from Dublin, a Dublin balladeer who had the same thing, a stack of ballads for the Dublin folk, you know. Yeah. So it wasn't all just country. The Dubs had it too.
Yes.
And they have their own songs now too, of course.
Does it still hold the same magic for you?
It does, except, well, it does. Is the short answer. I will be glued to the television. I'm not going to the match. I'm going to watch it on television this time because I see more in it.
Yeah.
I can analyse it better, and I can have a little sip by my side, and I can roar uninhibitedly without people looking at me. And I can sneak away when the news isn't good.
Yes.
If that is the case. No.
But you'll wake up on Sunday morning.
I will, and I'll turn on Sunday Miscellany, and they'll have contributors from Kerry and Dublin about the former All-Irelands, and it's just a magical day for all of us that are concerned. So it does have, but recently I found that I'm getting as much attracted now to the lower divisions. You know, see, we have television has conditioned us to excellence in everything. Unless we're watching the Olympic finals now, and unless fellas are doing 9.8 in the 100 metres, we're not interested, you know. Unless fellas are doing 3:55 in the mile or whatever it is, we're not interested. And unless it is an All-Ireland final, where fellas have trained hard for 7 or 8 months and excellence is on display, we seem to need excellence. We see Messi and we see all these fellas around the world, extraordinary athletes. But I found myself going back to local junior matches where the parish are out and none of them are superheroes and a lot of them have limited skills, but they're trying their best, and I love to watch the effort.
Yes.
And I love to watch the trainers and the parents. Now, the parents get excited and carried away too much in some of these cases. But to see local level, because the stakes are the same, you know?
Yes. Do you feel there's even more of a purity about it?
There is a purity about it, of course.
Because people will have criticised the GAA of late, you know, the Super 8s and veering towards elitism and television rights going to Sky Sports, and wonder if they've lost their way ever so slightly.
Yeah, but Joe Cahan one time said he was a great Kerry footballer in the old days and then was associated with the 4 in a row as a kind of a trainer. But someone came up to him in the training session and he begged to be excused from the training because he had tweaked his hamstring, you see. And Joe looked at him and said, "Your hamstring? When we were young, if someone talked about a hamstring, they'd think there's something you'd eat." No, that was his take on it. And it has gone, I mean, the biometrics and all these things, batteries on their backs, GPS and all that stuff. Look, I mean, I'm not criticising it. They're wonderful games to watch, but you mustn't think that is the gold nugget of it. The gold nugget of it is much lower level of expectation. It's effort, it's commitment. and it's a flag.
Ironically, those club players now are being less looked after than ever. They don't know when their matches are on, the fixtures, all that stuff is going on.
It is, and diet. For instance, collective training didn't come into Kerry until 1951, I understand.
Yeah. Eamon O'Sullivan.
Dr. Eamon O'Sullivan had it in Killarney, and it was 2 weeks before the All-Ireland final. They were gathered in the Park Hotel, I think, and Dr. Eamon O'Sullivan. Now, Gary, my brother, was involved in those matches, in those games, in those sessions, and he told me Dr. Eamon's diet was tomatoes. Everything was tomato. Tomatoes was the silver bullet of the diet.
This was the secret.
This was the secret weapon of things like that. When we were in Listowel in the mid-50s, a couple of expats came back from America who had been wounded in the Korean War. And they had a pension, obviously, and they were home to Listowel. One of them was a Mr. Sharkey, and he took charge of the Listowel Emmett senior team at the time, which I was aspiring to. And he took us for training. And he used to be out there doing calisthenics. No, we never had the word calisthenics, but it was jumping up and down and waving your hands and it was squatting and doing all these kind of things that we had never had about it. But then he turned at the end of the session to talking about diet. You've got to have the diet, you've got to have the steak, men. You've got to get that meat into you see. And this is 1953, 54 in Listowel, only 8 years after the war. We were still on rations and lots of things. Steaks, and there was a chap called Chuck Roach who played corner forward for Listowel at the time, and he was worried about this because his place was being threatened by this dietary mandatory provision. And he put up his hand timidly one day and he said, "Mr. Sharkey." "Yes, Mr. Roach." "Would black puddings do?" So that was how primitive it was at that time. So things have changed, and things have changed for the better. I'm not saying otherwise. But, I mean, we'll look out now on Sunday and we'll see 30 fine specimens of men putting their bodies and lives on line, putting their lives on hold for a couple of years, no doubt, to commit to something that is basically amateur. They're not being paid hundreds of thousands a week like the soccer players, and they're doing it for some undefinable value that is related to their community and their people and the country. And that is wonderful to see that, And it's the same in hurling, So you can't criticize it, but you just worry about the limits that it can get to before it breaks.
Are we approaching that point?
I wouldn't say so. No, I hope not. I hope not. It's a debatable point. But I said I'm going to talk about romance. I'm not going to talk about hard facts. I'm going to keep out all these.
We'll get back to the romance. Can I ask you about someone, actually? And I should say we are here with Bryan McMahon, and it's been great to have him. We've been on since 2 o'clock, and the hour has flown by. It's the Drive for 5 special. And it's all thanks to Tech 7. Simply take it and leave it. So your brother Gary won 2 All-Irelands. So a wonderful thing, I'm sure, for your family. And then you played 5 or 6 times for Kerry as well. You were in and around it for a time. Mick O'Connell's time. We had him on the show a couple of years ago, and he's a no-nonsense man, it's fair to say. And I think he found all of our questions utterly contemptible, actually, but kind of charming at the same time. It's an unusual evening. What was it like being around someone like that and around the team in those days?
Well, look, I don't want to exaggerate my prowess as a footballer. I did play at a certain level. I won a Sigerson with UCD and won a Dublin County Championship with them, and I played for down in Kerry. And I made 5 or 6 appearances in league for Kerry before I went to America at 23. So I had a short enough career.
Sure.
But I did have, and it's my proudest moment, I did strip off with Mick O'Connell at the centre of the field in the green and gold. So, and someone sent me a photograph of proof of that for fear my memory was failing.
Fantastic.
But let me just say a word about Mick O'Connell.
Yeah.
In my view, Mick O'Connell was the purest footballer, athlete that I ever saw. Artist is what I would say. I mean, if you watched O'Connell at centre field, before the kick-out was taken, and this is the opposition kick-out, he was moving. Short steps quickly. The kick-out was taken and he adjusted his run. He lengthened his stride. He was like a panther moving in on the prey. He had the eye of an eagle. and he lifted himself off with his left foot like a rocket, with his right knee thrust up under his chest. And he climbed, and he had mathematically figured out the point of his arc so that he caught the ball 2 or 3 inches over the crowd. And he hung up there for a couple of seconds while the rest of them fell off like water. And I think it might have been his right knee give him an extra thrust. And then he dispatched the ball. And many times he dispatched it before he touched the ground at all. He kicked it in mid-air, having picked out a forward. And if you were lucky enough to be a corner forward, as Gary, my brother, was, he'd put it in your pocket, he said. So that was Mick O'Connell. He was the nearest, the aesthetic of the man. Now, I've seen a lot of great footballers, I've seen a lot you could compare with, but in my view, he was unrivaled in his style, in his aesthetic. I often compared him when I saw Nureyev, the ballet dancer, dancing. And I was often surprised that some broadcaster didn't go back over the footage that we have of Mick O'Connell and put it to Tchaikovsky music. You know, he was in that line.
Yeah.
Now, there was Dermot Earley, there was Jerry O'Malley, there was lots of them. And one of the few people that has that poise and balance now at the moment is Diarmuid Connolly, in my view, for Dublin.
Yeah.
You know, he has a lovely poise and balance when he gets the ball. But O'Connell at his best, and when he was unimpeded, people began to mark him out of matches then, of course, you know. But he was supreme, and it was art in its highest form.
Yes, I've no doubt. And Brian, do you mean that literally when you say he would sometimes catch a ball and have kicked it in the air before he...
Absolutely, absolutely.
I've never seen that before.
Before he came down, before he landed, he had the ball gone. And his legs were up so high, and he had this right leg up like this,
Yeah.
you know, that way. And he dispatched it on the way down.
Wow.
So he was, you know, beautiful to watch, beautiful to have seen him. I was some time ago asked by Dr. Mick Loftus, I think, to sit in and select the greatest Sigerson team ever in UCD, you know. A nonsense exercise, of course, you know.
Sure.
Going back to 1926, as a fellow said.
Half the fun of it, though.
Half the fun of it was all debate, but no one took it seriously in the sense.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can't, and people would say, was he as good as Dick Fitzgerald, the other great Kerry, or Larry Stanley from Kildare in the old days, or, you know, some of the Ulster players, you know. And you just can't. But he was the ideal.
Yes.
In Plato's terms, the ideal footballer.
Yeah. To keep the romance going, who were your other favourite footballers?
Well, of course, there was some great Jack O'Shea, Dara O'Shea, Mickey Sheehy, the Spillane, that great Kerry team.
You have a soft spot for midfielders by the sound of things. You have a soft spot for midfielders by the sounds of things.
But midfielders are great. I mean, they're in the thick of it, you know. Unless you're winning your share at centre field, it's a lost cause most of the times. No, you know, I'm not going to go on further naming names because we had many players over the years gave us great pleasure. I mean, some of the greatest tussles were Sean O'Neill and Mick O'Dwyer. People forget that Mick O'Dwyer played left half-back, and Sean, and in those early 60 games when Sean O'Neill was emerging, Kevin O'Neill, the McCartan brothers, Paddy Doherty coming down, they were a fantastic team.
Yeah.
And they had brought in the Galway team of the mid-60s, 3 in a row. Beautiful players, ahead of their time in passing. Stockwell, Purcell, you know, I mean, you can name them all.
There is another aspect to, I guess, if we're talking about what football means to the country on this week of all weeks. There are the people in the country, and then for huge numbers around the world, there's a pang and a sense of being away from home and trying to connect with that. I know you went to Harvard at one point in the 60s. I'm sure you've travelled and been away and out of the country at different points. Do you have any memories of that experience?
I have.
And being away from all Ireland football?
I have. And I cry sometimes.
It's a very poignant thought, isn't it?
I was in Dublin Airport on a Sunday of an All-Ireland final in 1972 or 3, I'm not sure which when it was. It was just around the time we joined the EU, the common market as it was then, again in the news for other reasons. But we were being flown out to a conference of judicial personages, and we were flying to Heathrow to pick up some of the judiciary there and go on to Luxembourg. And I was in Dublin Airport at 3:10. And the digital clock was up there. And I closed my eyes and I could see everything, everything, in slow motion. The Artane Boys band, the clearing of the ball, the kicking around, the clearing of the ball, the ref fixing his watch, the ball, and I watched the clock. 15-12, 15-13, 15-40, 15-15. The ball is in. I had no radio. You couldn't get radio at the time. In Dublin Airport, there was some kind of a reason you couldn't get it. And I swore I would never schedule anything professionally for the day of an All-Ireland ever again. I remember being in San Clemente in California on an All-Ireland final day and trying to go up the mountain with some kind of an aerial trying to pick up the All-Ireland. I was in the south of France one time. We were staying in Nice. No, Cannes, I think it was. And I had made good arrangements the night before from the hotel to where would I get this on. And I was sent 40 miles east towards Italy because there was a restaurant there and he had 700 stations, this fella had. And if I went down, you'd be sure to get it. So we drove off down anyway in good time. And the restaurant here, the place was closed, the lights were on. He was having his own family dinner. So I had the temerity to knock and he brought me in. And he threw me the controls. And I went through the 650 stations without success. Now, it was now 20-2, match being at 3:15. The nearest point of a television was O'Neill's pub in Nice, 150 miles away. So my wife and I, my wife is from the north, and it was Tyrone versus Kerry. So we turned the car and headed across the Côte d'Azur. The roads were quiet, they must have been all watching the match.
Sure.
But we got into O'Neill's pub in Nice just when Peter Canavan was putting the ball in the net for Tyrone.
Wow, yeah.
So being away from it is very nostalgic.
Yes.
So that's why, to some extent, I have a son now who played a lot of football, and he's in Manchester. And contrary to the point about Sky, he makes the argument that he's made things very comfortable for a lot of the emigrants in England who can watch these matches now at home. They don't have to go around to the nearest pub and fight for grace to have it on, or go to the Irish clubs or the thing, you know. So that is the other side of that coin, and is catering for them. I know, I'm not entering the debate about whether it is right or wrong, or they're selling the family jewels or not, but there's an aspect of that to it, and you must cater for your foreigners as well. By the way, there was a fellow in Listowel in 1982 after the famous Derby goal, and there was fierce weeping and gnashing of teeth in Listowel after the match and so forth and so on. And he said, what harm? Can't we win 5 in a row next year? So maybe Dubs will have to say that next Monday.
They may well. And were you there for Derby's goal?
I was there for Derby.
Was your heart broken?
My heart was broken. It was, I suppose. Probably the best match I ever saw was in 1977, All-Ireland semi-final, Kerry and Dublin, Tony Hanaho and those crowd. As for pure football and for great football, that was a fantastic game. And even though Kerry came out the bad end of it, I had no regrets, because that was a wonderful exhibition. It was won by the better team by a bit of class from Tony Hanaho and these fellas, Keaveney. And when you come out from a match like that, if you're anyway fair-minded,
yes,
it's just you rejoice in the wonder of the experience.
So for you, winning is not really the point of all this.
Winning is a lot. Don't put words into my mouth. But I will say, winning is not everything.
Yes.
And I don't believe in winning at any cost. I do not believe in that. I believe you must try might and main, but it must be done all fair and above board.
Our time, unfortunately, is coming to a close. We're at 3 o'clock, believe it or not. It's zipped by. Is there anything else you want to leave us with? Thoughts or poetry or memories?
Well, the nearest I'm going to come to the Sunday game is another ballad, which the final line is, it's called Tradition Duchas. We savour Kerry victories, we salute a gallant foe. And when we lose, there's no excuse, we pick up our bags and go. So raise your glass, each lad and lass, to our warriors brave and bold, who again aspire to the Sam Maguire in the kingdom's green and gold. That's all I want to say about Sunday.
Beautiful. Listen, it's been such a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming in and doing this. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Time flows.
It
when
did.
You're talking about something you enjoy.
Well, yes. Bryan McMahon with us for the last hour. This is our Drive for Five special, All-Ireland Football Final Week, with thanks to Tech 7. Simply tech it and leave it. And again, sincere thanks to retired High Court Judge and many other things as well. Bryan McMahon. We'll take a break.